The howl cut through the icy air at 71 Tagrabo, a primal scream that froze the soul faster than Yakutia's merciless wind. "No one will touch my sister!" Yeva, just 10 years old, cried into the white void, her tiny body trembling under the weight of her fur coat, but her voice firm as eternal ice. Before her 300 hungry eyes gleamed in the gloom, 100-kilogram Siberian wolves, each a promise of death. With baby Anya nestled in her arms, her only warmth in the white hell, Yeva knew this was the end, or the beginning of a legend that would defy the Arctic. Yeva's cry echoed, a fragile challenge against the icy immensity. The wolves, for an instant, hesitated. Their eyes, previously fixed and relentless, flickered with momentary surprise. Yeva felt her heart pound in her chest, a hurried drum that seemed to want to escape. She clutched Anya tighter, feeling her sister's warmth, a small beacon of life amidst the darkness and biting cold. Anya's breathing was soft, oblivious to the danger surrounding them, and this innocence gave Yeva the strength not to collapse. Her parents, who had taught her to read the stars and listen to the wind's whisper, had departed too soon, taken by the disease that the harsh winter brought. But their voices still lived in Yeva's memory, especially her father's, who used to say, "Ice is a master, Yeva. It can be your enemy or your greatest ally. Learn to listen to it." At that moment, the words seemed to float in the frozen air, offering a thread of hope. The wolves did not remain still for long. One of them, the largest, with almost white fur, took a step forward, followed by others. The crunching ground under their paws seemed to amplify the sound, each movement a warning. Yeva recoiled a step, feeling the cold wood of the cabin against her back. She looked at Anya, who now stirred slightly, a soft whimper escaping her lips. Yeva kissed her sister's forehead, feeling the soft, warm skin. "It's all right, my little star," she whispered, more to herself than to the baby. Her eyes scanned the landscape around the cabin. Snowdrifts formed mounds, and ice covered everything in a thick, slippery layer. She remembered how her father used ice to create natural barriers, how he spoke about the resonance and fragility of certain formations. There was no time for elaborate traps, but perhaps there was a way to use the environment itself against them. One of the wolves let out a low growl, and Yeva felt a shiver run down her spine. She couldn't run. She couldn't hide. She had to face it. Her eyes fixed on a loose piece of wood, a thick branch that had broken off a nearby tree and was half buried in the snow near the cabin entrance. It was heavy, but not impossible to move. An idea, born of desperation and ancestral wisdom, began to take shape in her mind. She knew she needed to act, and quickly. Anya's life depended on it. With a sigh that turned to vapor in the air, Yeva made a decision, her determined gaze meeting the predator's shining eyes. Fear was still there, but now accompanied by a silent, unwavering courage. Yeva, with her heart pounding but her mind focused, adjusted Anya carefully inside her coat, freeing her hands. Her fingers, already numb with cold, fumbled for the thick, half-buried branch, a frozen-covered mass of wood. She breathed deeply, the icy air burning her lungs, and pulled with all her might. Her muscles, small but resilient, tensed. The branch barely moved, trapped by the ice. The wolves, sensing her distraction, growled louder. The leader took a step, yellow eyes fixed on her. A pang of despair threatened, but Anya, so fragile, spurred her on. "Father, Mother, help me," she murmured. She remembered her father teaching her to use her body weight, to find the leverage point. With renewed effort, Yeva knelt, using her body as a counterweight. She pushed the branch with her shoulders, feeling the sharp tip scraping her coat. The ice gave way with a dry crack, and the branch, slowly, began to move through the snow. A tiny advance, but an advance. Yeva's idea was not to create an impenetrable barrier, but something that would cause hesitation, that would disrupt the wolves' coordination. She aimed for the gentle slope leading to the cabin door, where snow hid a layer of slippery ice. Positioning the branch to create an unexpected obstacle could buy time or scare them. Her eyes swept the area, looking for other useful elements. A glance at the horizon, where the aurora was still a distant promise, brought a thread of hope. The wolves, impatient, stirred. Their growls intensified, and some sniffed the air, sensing the fear or determination of the small figure. Yeva felt the cold intensify, a shiver of dread. But she did not stop. Every inch of the branch was a victory. She thought of her people's tales, of heroes who faced the impossible, of the strength that came from connection to the land and ancestors. With the branch loose, Yeva dragged it with difficulty to the cabin entrance, positioning it across the path. It was not tall, but wide and heavy, and its base in the snow created instability. Wolves trying to jump would have to miscalculate their landing on the slippery ice. It was a simple trap, but it could work against the predator's momentum. She crouched, panting, feeling cold sweat run down her forehead, despite the cold. Anya, sensing the movement and discomfort, whimpered louder. Yeva picked her up, cradling her gently. "Shh, my little ice flower," she whispered, kissing her soft hair. That warm body was her anchor, the reason to fight. She looked at the wolves, who approached with more audacity. The leader stopped before the branch, sniffing it suspiciously. Its eyes met Yeva's, and for an instant, there seemed to be a mutual recognition of defiance. Yeva knew the branch was only the first step. She needed more. Her eyes moved to the ice blocks her father used for shelters, now partially covered by snow. They were heavy, but pushing some to form a barricade behind the branch would make their advance even harder. Time was running out. The cold penetrated her bones. But the flame of hope, fueled by love for Anya, burned strong in her chest. She needed a plan for the approaching night. Yeva looked at the ice blocks, each a miniature fortress, but too heavy for her child's arms. The sun began to set, painting the sky in cold shades of purple and orange, a beautiful and terrifying spectacle. For darkness would bring an even more biting cold, and the wolves doubled audacity. Anya, in her arms, slept an uneasy sleep, her tiny fingers clutching Yeva's coat fabric. The girl felt weariness weigh on her shoulders, an exhaustion that seemed to come from within her bones, a deep fatigue that threatened to paralyze her. But the love for her sister was a fire that would not go out, a flame that propelled her to continue, to fight. She remembered how her father and the other men of the village moved gigantic ice blocks. It was not by brute force, he explained, but by intelligence and knowledge of nature. "Ice slides on ice, Yeva. Use nature to your advantage," he always said. Her father's words resonated, and Yeva looked at the ground. The soft snow was an obstacle, but beneath it, a layer of smooth, hard ice waited. She needed to clear the snow to create a path, a sliding surface. With Anya carefully accommodated inside the cabin, wrapped in warm furs, Yeva picked up an improvised shovel, a wide, flat piece of wood her father used to scrape snow from the roof. Her muscles protested with every movement, every painful scrape, but she began to scrape snow around one of the larger ice blocks near the cabin. The air cut her exposed skin, and her fingers ached, but she persisted with surprising tenacity. The wolves, now more numerous and closer, watched her every move with a hungry and growing curiosity. Their eyes gleamed in the growing gloom, and low growls punctuated the icy silence, increasing the tension. Yeva felt their heavy gaze, the invisible pressure of their presence, like a mantle of ice over her. Fear was an icy wave that climbed her spine, but she transformed it into fuel, into pure willpower. Every scrape of snow was an act of defiance, a small victory against despair. With each portion of snow removed, the smooth, translucent ice appeared, reflecting the dim twilight light. It was arduous and slow work, demanding every ounce of her energy. Sweat ran down her forehead, mixing with the silent tears that stubbornly appeared, but which she quickly wiped away. She couldn't cry, not now. Anya depended on her, and that was all that mattered. Finally, a narrow, slippery path was cleared to the first ice block. Yeva breathed deeply, gloved hands rubbing together to try and warm them, feeling the intense cold. Pushing that block would be a test of her strength and ingenuity. She positioned herself, remembering her father's technique. Use body weight, push with legs, not just arms, to maximize force. She placed her shoulders against the cold ice surface and pushed with all her soul. The block, enormous and heavy, groaned. For an instant, it didn't move, seeming to defy her. Yeva closed her eyes, feeling frustration and despair threatened to overwhelm her. But then, an image of Anya smiling, of her parents teaching her, of her village, of her people, flooded her mind, giving her new breath. She opened her eyes, a new wave of determination washing over her. With a muffled cry, Yeva pushed again, with all the strength she could muster, with the courage of her ancestors. This time, the ice gave way, sliding with a soft creak over the smooth surface she had prepared. It was a tiny movement, almost imperceptible, but it was a beginning, a sign that it was possible. Yeva continued pushing, stopping to catch her breath, pushing again. Every inch was a hard-won victory, a step forward in the fight for survival. The wolves, who had seemed skeptical, now showed signs of impatience. The leader, with his almost white fur, scratched the ground with his paw, a clear and threatening warning. Night was almost complete, and darkness brought with it a new layer of terror. Yeva knew she needed to speed up, that every second counted. She needed to build a barricade before total darkness swallowed them, before it was too late. Her eyes, once full of fear, now shone with an iron resolve, the promise that she would not give up. The small figure of Yeva against the icy vastness and the imminent threat was a silent testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit. She would not be broken, ever. Yeva, with muscles burning and breath short, pushed the second ice block. Her small shoulders ached, but the image of Anya, sleeping safely inside the cabin, was a balm for her pain. The ice once more creaked and slid over the path she had cleared, a dragging sound that seemed like a lament in the deepening night. Every inch gained was a small victory against the relentless vastness of the Arctic and the growing threat of the wolves. She remembered her mother's words. Strength is not just in muscles, Yeva, but in a heart that refuses to give up. And Yeva's heart, at that moment, was a drum of courage. The wolves, who had been watching with cautious curiosity, now moved with more impatience. The leader, the one with the almost white fur, scratched the snow with his paw, a harsh sound that cut the silence. Its yellow eyes fixed on Yeva, and she felt the intensity of the gaze, almost like an icy touch. She knew they were testing her limits, waiting for a sign of weakness. But Yeva would not give them that satisfaction. She clenched her teeth, her breath forming small clouds of vapor in the frozen air, and continued to push. The third ice block seemed even heavier than the previous ones. Her hands, even with fur gloves, were numb, and a sharp pang of pain shot up her arms. She stopped for a moment, resting her forehead on the cold ice, feeling exhaustion take over her body. But then, Anya's faint cry came from inside the cabin, a sound that broke the spell of weariness. Yeva lifted her head, her eyes fixed on the cabin door where her little sister rested. The love for Anya was a river of strength that ran through her veins, revitalizing her. "I won't fail you, Anya," Yeva whispered, her voice hoarse with effort. She straightened up, took a deep breath, and pushed again, this time with a silent fury. The block, with a monumental effort, finally moved, sliding to join the others, forming a precarious line of defense. 3 ice blocks, pushed with the strength of a 10-year-old girl, now stood as a small wall behind the branch she had positioned earlier. It was not a fortress, but it was an obstacle, a barrier the wolves would have to overcome. The darkness of night had completely swallowed the last light of dusk. The stars shone with a cruel intensity in the black sky, and the cold seemed to have deepened even further, biting Yeva's exposed skin. She ran into the cabin, her feet almost stumbling with exhaustion, and picked Anya up in her arms. The baby was awake, whimpering softly, her big dark eyes searching for Yeva's. The girl cradled her, feeling the warmth of the small body against hers, a precious comfort amidst the despair. Yeva sat near the door. Anya nestled in her lap and watched the wolves through a small crack in the wood. They were closer now, their dark silhouettes moving restlessly in the snow. The leader, with his white fur almost invisible in the darkness, approached the improvised barricade. He sniffed the ice, then the branch, and let out a deep growl, a sound that made Yeva's blood run cold. He tried to jump the branch, but the slippery ice under the snow made him hesitate, and he retreated, frustrated. The other wolves, encouraged by the leader, began to stir, circling the barricade looking for a weak point. Yeva felt a lump in her throat, but refused to cry. She clutched Anya tighter, kissing her forehead. "We're safe, my little one. We're safe," she repeated, more to herself than to her sister. The night was long and dangerous, but Yeva had built her small fortress of ice and courage. She knew the fight was just beginning, but her determination was as solid as the eternal ice of Yakutia. She would be Anja's guardian, no matter the cost. The night wore on, dense and relentless, and Yeva, hugging Anya tightly, felt her heart pound in her chest. The baby's crying had subsided to a soft sob, and she breathed calmly in the warmth of Yeva's coat, oblivious to the silent battle raging outside. Through the crack, Yeva saw the shadows of the wolves dance in the snow, impatient. The leader, frustrated by the improvised barricade, began to bark, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed in the icy vastness. It was a call, a signal to the rest of the pack. The other wolves responded, their howls mixing with the leader's bark, creating a chilling symphony of hunger and fury. Yeva felt a shiver run down her spine, and her arms tightened around Anya even more. Her eyes scanned the cabin, looking for something, anything, that could offer a new line of defense. The wood creaked under the weight of the wind, and the cold seemed to seep through every crack, stealing what little warmth remained. She remembered her grandfather, a wise hunter, who said, "The predator fears the unknown more than pain. Deceive its senses and you will deceive its hunt." Yeva looked at the small stone brazier in the center of the cabin, where almost extinguished embers still emitted a faint warmth. Her father always lit a larger fire at night, not just for warmth, but to ward off wild animals. The smoke, the smell of burning wood, were signs of human presence, something wolves usually avoided. But the fire needed fuel, and the firewood was outside, near the door, dangerously close to the wolves. A pang of despair threatened to overwhelm her, but Anya's soft breath on her neck brought her back. She couldn't risk going outside. Her eyes fell on a small leather pouch hanging on the wall. It was her mother's herb pouch, fragrant and full of dried leaves and roots they used for teas and remedies. Her mother always said some herbs had a strong smell, capable of warding off even the most stubborn insects. Perhaps they could ward off the wolves. Careful not to wake Anya, Yeva stood up, her muscles stiff and sore. She picked up the herb pouch, feeling the rough texture of the leather under her fingers. She opened it and inhaled the strong, earthy smell. There was a mixture of dried birch leaves, moss, and a root her people called spirit root, known for its pungent aroma. It was a risky idea, but it was all she had. She approached the crack, the wolves still howling and scratching at the barricade. The leader tried to jump the branch again, but slipped on the ice, falling with a grunt of frustration. Yeva breathed deeply, gathered all the courage she had, and with a swift movement threw a handful of the dried herbs through the crack, directly at the leader wolf. The strong, unusual smell of the herbs hit the wolf's sensitive snout. It stopped, sniffing the air suspiciously, its ears twitching. A low growl escaped its throat, but it was a growl of confusion, not attack. It recoiled a step, then another, shaking its head. The other wolves, noticing the leader's reaction, also hesitated, sniffing the air and backing away slightly. Yeva felt a small thread of hope. It was not a permanent solution, but it had worked, at least for a moment. She threw another handful of herbs, spreading the smell around the barricade. The wolves, though still present, seemed more cautious, less aggressive. The leader, with a last suspicious glance at the cabin, moved away a little, followed by some of his companions. The night was still long, and the cold continued to bite, but Yeva had bought some time. She sat down again, pulling Anya closer, feeling the warmth of her sister's body. Her eyes, once full of dread, now shone with renewed determination. She had used her parents' wisdom, the strength of her love, and the resilience of her people. The fight would continue, but Yeva was not alone. The spirit of her ancestors and the love for Anya would be her shield against the darkness of the night and the ferocity of the wolves. The immediate effect of the herbs was a temporary reprieve. The wolves, initially confused by the pungent smell, had indeed retreated a few steps, their howls diminishing to more contained growls. Yeva, with Anya nestled in her arms, felt a fleeting relief, a breath of hope that mingled with the vapor of her breath. But the calm did not last. Through the crack, she saw the leader, the almost white-furred wolf, shake its head vigorously as if to clear its senses, and then it approached the barricade again. This time, it did not try to jump the branch. Instead, it began to sniff the ground around, testing the snow, looking for a weak point, a way to circumvent the obstacle. Its yellow eyes, cunning and hungry, fixed on the cabin. The other wolves, following the leader's example, began to spread out, circling the small structure, their dark silhouettes moving like ghosts in the gloom. They were not leaving, they were just changing tactics. Yeva felt her heart clench. The herbs had been a surprise, but not a lasting solution. The pack was intelligent, persistent. The night stretched on, icy and endless, and the cold inside the cabin seemed to increase with each passing minute. The embers in the brazier, which had offered a faint warmth, now barely glowed, threatening to go out completely. Yeva looked at Anya, who slept deeply, her face pale and serene. The girl touched her little sister's forehead. It was cold, colder than it should be. An icy panic began to spread through Yeva's chest. Not just the threat of the wolves that scared her now, it was the Arctic itself, the relentless cold that seeped into everything, that stole life silently. The firewood. The firewood was outside, stacked near the cabin wall, covered by a hide tarp. It was the only fuel left to rekindle the fire and bring warmth to Anya. Yeva knew that going outside was an immense, perhaps fatal risk. The wolves were lurking, and the darkness made them even more dangerous. But the alternative, letting Anya freeze, was unthinkable. The love for her sister was a silent scream in her heart, stronger than any fear. She could not fail. She could not allow the cold to take the last part of her family. With a trembling sigh, Yeva carefully placed Anya back in the improvised cradle, covering her with all available furs. She kissed the baby's forehead, feeling the icy skin under her lips. "I'll be right back, my little star," she whispered, her voice choked. Her eyes scanned the cabin one last time, looking for something she could use. A small hand axe, used for cutting small branches, was hanging on the wall. It was heavy for her, but perhaps it could be useful, not as a weapon, but to break ice or ward something off. She picked it up, feeling the cold weight of the metal in her gloved hands. The cabin door was made of thick wood, with a simple latch. Yeva opened it as slowly and silently as possible, the soft creak sounding like thunder in the night stillness. The icy air invaded the cabin, biting her skin. She peered outside, her eyes trying to adjust to the darkness. The shadows of the wolves still moved, but seemed to be a little further away, focused on sniffing the barricade. It was now or never. With the hand axe firmly gripped, Yeva crawled out of the cabin, staying as close as possible to the wall. Every movement was calculated, every breath held. The soft snow muffled her steps, but the cold was unbearable, penetrating her clothes and burning her skin. She felt the invisible gaze of the wolves upon her, a chilling sensation that made her hold her breath. The pile of firewood seemed like a mirage in the darkness, so close yet so distant. She reached the hide tarp covering the firewood, her numb fingers struggling to untie the frozen knots. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. The wolves were quieter now, perhaps sensing her presence, or perhaps just observing. Yeva pulled a bundle of firewood, the sound of wood scraping against the tarp seeming deafening. She turned to go back, when a low growl, coming from very close, made her blood run cold. The leader with almost white fur was there, a few meters from her, his yellow eyes shining intensely in the darkness, totally fixed on her. He had circumvented the barricade. Yeva was exposed, vulnerable, with the firewood in her arms and the axe too heavy to be an effective defense. The turning point had arrived, and with it, a new and terrifying challenge. Yeva froze, her heart pounding uncontrollably in her chest. The alpha wolf, a spectral figure in the gloom, stood before her, its yellow eyes like hungry embers. The firewood seemed impossibly heavy in her arms, the small axe, too heavy, seemed useless in her numb hand. Her whole body screamed to flee, but her feet seemed glued to the icy ground. Anya, the image of her sister's pale face, cold in the cradle, flooded her mind, overcoming the paralyzing fear. It was not about her. It was about Anya. The wolf took a slow, calculated step, its head tilted, sniffing the air. A low, guttural growl vibrated in its chest, a sound Yeva felt rise through her legs, through the frozen ground. She could almost feel the animal's icy, wild breath on her face. This was the decisive moment. Her father's words echoed in her mind, clear as ice. The predator fears the unknown more than pain. Deceive its senses. She needed to create something unexpected, something that would scare it. Her eyes darted from the axe to the frozen ground, and then to a thick, twisted root exposed beneath the snow near the cabin wall. It was solid, unbreakable. A desperate idea ignited in her mind. With a sudden and surprising burst of energy which belied her exhaustion, Yeva raised the small axe. She did not aim it at the wolf, but struck it with all her might against the twisted root. Crack! The sound was sharp, metallic, and terrifyingly loud in the deep silence of the Arctic night. A snap of wood breaking and metal striking, amplified by the frozen air. The alpha wolf flinched violently, its ears flattening against its head. It let out a surprised yelp, a sound very different from its menacing growl, and recoiled 2 full steps, its eyes wide with confusion and alarm. The sudden and unexpected noise had indeed scared it. Before the wolf could recover, Yeva seized the opportunity. Dropping the axe, a sacrifice she barely registered, she clutched the bundle of firewood to her chest and scrambled backward, pushing herself through the narrow opening of the cabin door. She did not look back. Her only thought was to get inside, to safety, to Anya. The door closed with a muffled thud, the simple wooden latch clicking into place. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her lungs burning with the effort and the icy air she had inhaled. She leaned against the door, the firewood still clutched to her chest, her body trembling uncontrollably. Through the small crack, she saw the alpha wolf, still agitated, circling the spot where she had been. It sniffed the ground where the axe lay, then let out a frustrated growl, its confusion turning to anger. But it had not attacked. It had been scared. Yeva did not lose another second. Her hands, though numb and trembling, moved with purpose. Quickly, she added the precious firewood to the dying embers in the brazier. The dry wood caught fire almost immediately, a small flame flickering to life, then growing, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The warmth, though faint at first, was a promise, a beacon against the encroaching cold. She ran to Anya, pulling back the furs. The baby's lips were bluish, her breathing shallow. Yeva's heart clenched with a new wave of terror. The cold had been more insidious than she imagined. Gently, she picked Anya up, pressing the small body against hers, sharing the warmth she had left, positioning them near the growing fire. She rubbed Anya's tiny hands, blew warm air on her face, whispering words of comfort and love. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, a faint blush returned to Anya's cheeks. Her eyes flickered, and she let out a soft whimper, then a small cough. Yeva felt a profound relief, tears finally blurring her vision. Anya was still with her. The fire crackled, growing stronger, pushing back the cold, pushing back the darkness. The wolves outside continued their agitated movements, their howls now more distant, more frustrated. Yeva had faced the apex predator of the Arctic, not with brute force, but with a sudden and unexpected sound, using her intelligence and the hostile environment itself. She had bought more time, and more importantly, had brought the warmth back. The night was far from over, but Anya was safe, for now. And Yeva, though exhausted, felt a renewed strength, a fierce resolve burning within her, as bright and unwavering as the fire she had just rekindled. Yeva hugged Anya tightly, feeling the small body gradually warm. The fire in the brazier crackled cheerfully, casting a golden glow on the cabin walls and dispelling the deepest shadows. Anya, with a sigh, nestled closer, her lips now pink and her breathing regular. Yeva kissed her forehead, immense relief flooding her chest. The battle against the cold, for now, had been won. But the night was still a dark and threatening tapestry, and outside, the wolves had not given up. Through the crack, Yeva watched the restless silhouettes. The howls had diminished, replaced by low growls and the sound of paws scratching the snow. They were frustrated, but not defeated. The leader, the white-furred wolf, seemed to be organizing the pack, its silent commands conveyed by head and tail movements. Yeva knew that the sudden noise tactic had worked once, but it wouldn't work again. She needed something more. Her mind, though exhausted, buzzed with memories. The stories her grandfather told around the campfire, her mother's lessons about nature. Darkness is the predator's friend, Yeva, her mother had said, but light is a mirror that reflects the human soul, and animals fear it. Yeva looked at the fire, at the dancing flames. The warmth was vital, but the light could be a weapon. She remembered how her father, on hunting nights, used torches to ward off bears. She didn't have torches, but she had fire, and she had an idea. Careful not to disturb Anya, Yeva stood up. Her muscles protested, but determination was stronger. She searched the cabin, her eyes sweeping the few belongings. In the corner near a pile of furs, there was an old, sturdy piece of cloth, used for patching. It was not large, but it would do. With the cloth in hand, Yeva returned to the brazier. She tore a strip of the cloth, wrapping it firmly around a thin, dry branch she had picked up to light the fire. She dipped the tip of the cloth in some animal fat her mother kept for cooking and lubricating tools. It was an improvised torch, fragile, but perhaps sufficient. She lit the tip of the cloth on the liveliest ember. The fat caught fire, and a small flame flickered, then grew, casting a more intense light than the brazier alone. Yeva felt a comforting warmth in her hands, but also a new wave of courage. It was a weak light against the vastness of the night, but it was her light. She approached the crack again, the improvised torch raised. The wolves were closer now, their dark forms almost touching the barricade. The leader was sniffing the ice, its eyes fixed on the cabin. With a deep sigh, Yeva pushed the torch through the crack, moving it from side to side. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. The sudden light and the smell of smoke and burning fat hit the wolves hard. The leader recoiled with a sharp yelp, its pupils contracting. The other wolves, caught by surprise, also backed away, some stumbling in the snow. The pack dispersed slightly, their movements now more hesitant, less aggressive. Yeva continued to move the torch, creating the illusion of a larger fire, of a stronger human presence. The fear in her eyes was replaced by a spark of triumph. She was not just defending, she was attacking with the wisdom of her people. The fire, which was once just warmth, now was a shield, a weapon, a symbol of her resistance. Anya, awakened by the movement, looked at Yeva with sleepy eyes. Yeva smiled at her, a tired smile, but full of love. "We're safe, Anya," she repeated, her voice firmer now. The night was still long, but Yeva had found a new way to fight, a new hope. The indomitable spirit of Yakutia burned bright in the heart of that girl, stronger than the cold, stronger than fear, stronger than darkness. Yeva, with the improvised torch still raised, felt the warmth of the flame in her hands and renewed hope in her heart. The wolves had retreated but not disappeared. Their yellow eyes still gleamed in the darkness, watching her with a mixture of caution and persistence. The leader, the white-furred one, let out a low, prolonged howl, a sound that seemed to carry all the pack's frustration. It was a call, not for immediate attack, but for regrouping, for a new strategy. Yeva knew that the light, like the herbs, was only a palliative. The night was still young for the ferocity of those predators. She lowered the torch, letting it burn closer to the brazier to conserve the fat. Anya, now warmer, slept peacefully, and Yeva watched her with a love that ached in her chest. Every small victory was a sigh of relief, but with each sigh, weariness enveloped her like a shroud. Her muscles were stiff, her mind exhausted, but the image of Anya was her fuel, the flame that could not be extinguished. The wolves, outside, began to move differently, no longer focused on the main barricade. Yeva heard soft, persistent scratching coming from another side of the cabin, near the ice and wood wall. They were testing every point, looking for a weakness. Her grandfather always said that wolves were masters at finding the easiest path, the crack in the armor. And Yeva's armor, her small cabin, had many cracks. A new kind of fear invaded her, not the fear of direct attack, but the fear of infiltration, of silent persistence. The ice that formed part of the cabin walls was solid, but not unbreakable. Small ice blocks were used for insulation, but a strong and persistent wolf could, over time, dig or scratch. Yeva remembered a story her father told about a particularly harsh winter, when hungry and desperate wolves had tried to dig under the walls of a village. She approached the ice wall, pressing her ear against it. The scratches were clearer now, a scraping, metallic sound that sent shivers down her spine. They were trying to dig, or perhaps just scratch the ice to create an opening. Yeva felt the intense cold of the wall, and a pang of panic hit her. If they managed to make a crack large enough, the cold would rush in with full force, and the wolves would soon follow. With the torch in one hand, Yeva fumbled along the ice wall with the other. The ice was smooth and hard, but she felt small imperfections where the blocks joined. It was there that the wolves were concentrating their efforts. She needed something to reinforce that part, to prevent them from advancing. Her eyes scanned the cabin, desperate for a solution. There were very few objects. A small wooden bench, some furs, Anya's cradle. Nothing that could seal an ice wall. Then her eyes fell on the water bucket that stood near the brazier. The water was precious, melted from ice, but a bold and risky idea sparked in her mind. Ice was her enemy, but it could also be her ally. Her grandfather had taught that water, when frozen, could be the strongest of barriers. Carefully, she picked up the bucket, feeling the weight of the water. The flame of the torch flickered, casting dancing shadows as she moved. She approached the crack in the wall, where the wolves' scratches persisted. With a deep sigh, Yeva poured some of the water through the crack. The liquid seeped through the small openings, and the icy air outside would do its work quickly, hardening every drop. She heard a surprised yelp from outside, and the scratches stopped for a moment. The leader, no doubt, had felt the icy water. Yeva continued, pouring more water, creating a gradually forming, invisible and strong ice barrier. It was a race against time, against the cold, against the wolves' persistence. She knew she was using the very essence of Yakutia against its predators, transforming danger into protection. The night was still long, but Yeva had solidified her defense, a bond of ice forged by ancestral wisdom and unwavering love for Anya. The water, a thin veil of liquid hope, quickly succumbed to the Arctic's embrace. In a few moments, the liquid Yeva had poured through the cracks in the ice wall solidified, transforming into an invisible and even more resistant barrier. The scratches of the wolves ceased for a moment, replaced by yelps of frustration. Yeva, with the torch in hand, felt a momentary relief, but knew that the pack's intelligence was as relentless as the cold. The leader, with white fur, let out a hoarse howl, a sound that seemed to cut the icy air and echo in the depths of the night. It was a command, and the other wolves responded, not with a direct attack, but with a change of tactics. Yeva heard a new sound, more muffled, coming from below, near the base of the cabin. It was a persistent scratching, but this time accompanied by a scraping of earth and snow. They were starting to dig. A renewed panic tightened Yeva's chest. If the wolves managed to undermine the cabin's base, the entire structure could give way, exposing Anya to the cold and the predators. The cabin, though strong, had not been designed to withstand a prolonged subterranean attack. Weariness weighed on her shoulders, every muscle aching. But the image of Anya, sleeping serenely, was a constant reminder of her mission. She knelt, pressing her ear to the packed earth floor. The sounds were clear. The wolves' paws and muzzles removing snow and frozen earth, trying to create a passage underneath. The cold rising from the ground seemed more intense now, a silent threat added to the wolves' hunger. The words of her grandmother, a wise and strong woman, came to her mind. The earth is the mother of all, Yeva. Its secrets lie in its solidity. To build, you must understand how it supports itself. To defend, you must know its weak points. Yeva remembered how houses were built on solid foundations, often reinforced with ice and stones to resist thawing and ground movement. She didn't have stones, but she had snow and ice in abundance, and she had the remaining water in the bucket, now almost half empty. An idea, bold and desperate, began to form. If the wolves were trying to undermine the base, she could use the earth and ice itself to reinforce it. With the torch still lit, Yeva began to gather the soft snow that accumulated in the cabin's corners. She piled it against the inner wall, right where the digging sounds were strongest. Then carefully, she picked up the bucket of water. Water was vital for drinking, but Anya's survival depended on every decision. She poured the water slowly over the pile of snow. The liquid penetrated the white flakes, transforming them into a dense paste. The icy air inside the cabin, though less intense than outside, would do its work. The soaked snow would begin to freeze, creating an internal barrier of compacted ice and snow, reinforcing the cabin's foundation from the inside out. The scratches outside diminished, then stopped. The wolves, no doubt, felt the resistance, the new solidity that emerged. The leader let out another howl, this time with a tone of confusion and irritation. Yeva continued her work, moving methodically, feeling the warmth of the fire on her back and the cold of the snow in her hands. Every drop of water, every handful of snow was an act of love and resistance. Anya stirred in the cradle, a small whimper escaping her lips. Yeva ran to her, checking her warmth. The baby was fine, the blush on her cheeks a balm for Yeva's exhausted heart. She kissed Anya's forehead, feeling a wave of renewed strength. The night was still a trial, but Yeva had turned another threat into an opportunity, using the wisdom of her people and the strength of her love. The cabin was safer, more resistant. The wolves were still there. But Yeva had shown them that her home was impregnable, a bastion of ice and will, erected by a girl who refused to yield. Yeva felt her body exhausted, but her mind remained on high alert. The barrier of compacted ice and snow, though invisible, had silenced the subterranean scratches, and for a brief moment a glimmer of hope bloomed in her chest. Anya slept. Her warmth was the only thing that mattered, but the stillness outside was deceptive, a heavy silence that Yeva recognized as the calm before the storm. The wolves had not disappeared. They were regrouping, their cunning as sharp as their claws. The leader, with white fur, let out a howl that was not of frustration but of command, a deep sound that seemed to vibrate in the frozen air itself. A call to final action. The other wolves responded with low growls, their silhouettes moving in a coordinated pattern. Yeva felt a shiver run down her spine, a dark premonition. They were concentrating again, but this time the energy was different, more focused, more dangerous. She approached the door, where the improvised barricade held firm. The sounds of heavy paws in the snow were clearer now, the wild scent more intense. The wolves were no longer testing, they were preparing for a massive attack. Yeva knew that the door, though reinforced, was the most vulnerable point. If the entire pack charged, the old wood and ice would crack. This was the final attack, the climax of that night of terror. Her father's words echoed in her mind, no longer as a whisper, but as a battle cry. When brute force fails, the mind must prevail, deceive the eyes, scare the soul. Yeva looked at the brazier, at the fire that still burned, her last ally. The improvised torch was almost at its end, the fat running out. She needed something more, something that would create an illusion of power, a threat that would overcome the predator's hunger. Her eyes scanned the cabin, desperate. Few objects, but her mind worked with the speed of desperation. In the corner, there was an old hide drum used in celebrations, a gift from her grandfather. It was large, heavy, and the sound it produced was deep and resonant. Beside it, a pile of dry, light furs her mother used for insulation. A bold and risky idea ignited in her mind. The growls outside intensified, turning into a menacing chorus. Yeva could feel the pressure against the door, the wolves' bodies crashing against the wood. Crack! A sharp sound, the barricade wood yielding slightly. No more time. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, Yeva dragged the drum near the door. She picked up the light furs and, with the almost extinguished torch, lit one of them on the brazier's embers. The dry fur caught fire quickly, releasing dense smoke and a strong smell, but what she wanted was the light. She waved it furiously, creating a dancing blaze. Then, with all her courage, Yeva raised the drum and struck it with her free hand, with the force of her desperation. Boom! The sound reverberated through the cabin, deep and thunderous, amplified by the icy air. She struck it again and again, in an irregular but powerful rhythm, while waving the burning fur through the door crack. The reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. The wolves, who were about to breach the barricade, froze. The sound of the drum, mixed with the dancing light and smoke, was something they had never encountered. It was not the sound of an animal, nor of a single human. It was something ancestral, something that spoke of a larger, more dangerous presence. The leader let out a yelp of alarm, recoiling abruptly. The other wolves, confused and terrified, followed suit, dispersing in panic. Yeva continued to beat the drum, the burning fur in her hand, until the last silhouette disappeared into the darkness. The silence that followed was no longer threatening, but of relief, deep and absolute. She fell to her knees, the drum and the burnt fur falling from her hands. The tears, which she had held back for so long, finally rolled down her face, mixing with sweat and smoke. Anja, awakened by the noise, let out a small cry, and Yeva hugged her, feeling the warmth of life, the proof of her victory. The night was won. The dawn, with its promise of salvation, was near. Yeva remained on her knees, hugging Anja tightly, feeling the small body warm against hers. The tears, once a contained river, now flowed freely, washing away the fear and tension of hours of battle. The silence outside was a balm, no longer threatening, but a testament to victory. Anja, with her soft cry, nestled into Yeva's neck, and the older girl felt a love as vast as Yakutia itself. The fire in the brazier, though low, still crackled, casting dancing shadows that seemed to celebrate with them. Slowly, Yeva composed herself. Her muscles screamed in protest. Every movement was an agony, but the urgency to check outside still propelled her. With Anja snuggled in her arms, she crawled to the door crack. Outside, darkness began to recede. A thin line of grey light appeared on the eastern horizon, painting the sky with pale shades of hope. No more yellow eyes gleamed in the night. The wolves' footprints were everywhere, marks of fury and despair, but the pack had dispersed, their heavy silhouettes no longer visible. They had left. A deep sigh of relief escaped Yeva's lips, releasing the last remnant of panic. She had succeeded. She and Anja were alive. The cold was still biting, but the sun promised a truce, a new beginning. Yeva sat down again near the brazier, pulling the furs to cover Anja and herself. The warmth of the fire, once a survival tool, now was an invitation to well-deserved rest. While Anja went back to sleep, a deep and innocent slumber, Yeva allowed herself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. The memories of the night mingled. The wolves' howl, the smell of smoke, the biting cold, the hopelessness, and finally, the burst of courage. She touched the improvised torch, now just a piece of charred branch, and the hide drum, with the mark of her exhausted hands. Each object was a silent reminder of her struggle, of her resilience. The ancestral wisdom of her people had been her guide, the stories of her grandfather and her mother, the teachings about ice, fire, earth, and the cunning of animals. She did not fight with brute force, but with intelligence, with the strength of the love she felt for her sister. Her parents would have been proud. A pang of sadness hit her as she thought of them, but it was quickly replaced by renewed determination. She was Anja's guardian now, and that responsibility made her stronger than she ever imagined. Yeva watched Anja, her serene face, long eyelashes resting on rosy cheeks. Her sister's life was a miracle, a gift she had defended tooth and nail against the relentless vastness of Yakutia. She kissed Anja's forehead again, a silent promise that she would always protect her. The bond between them, forged in the warmth of the fire and the cold of the night, was unbreakable. Outside, the dawn light spread, revealing the frozen landscape in all its austere beauty. The white of the snow, once a mantle of threat, now seemed an immaculate sheet, a new beginning. The air, though still icy, had a different freshness, a promise that life would continue, despite all adversities. Yeva knew that the path ahead would be long and difficult. Yakutia did not forgive, but she was not alone. She had Anja, and she had the strength she had discovered within herself. With the sun rising, casting golden rays over the horizon, Yeva felt a warmth, not just physical, but in her soul. She had faced the greatest threat of her young life and emerged victorious. Not a legend told by others, but a story lived by her, etched in her heart and in the memory of that night. The orphan girl, just 10 years old, had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the indomitable YAKUT spirit. She not only ensured her sister's survival, but forged her own legend, a testament to the extraordinary strength that resides in the heart of a girl who refused to yield to the cruel fate of the Arctic. The future was uncertain, but Yeva was certain that as long as Anya was by her side, they would face any challenge together under the vast and icy sky of Yakutia. The sun slowly climbed the horizon, painting the sky in pink and golden hues, announcing the end of the longest and most terrifying night of Yeva's life. The cold was still biting, but the light brought a promise of renewal, a breath of hope. With Anya asleep in her arms, Yeva felt her body relax, the tension of hours of vigil giving way. She kissed her sister's soft forehead, smelling the sweet baby scent and the strong life pulsating there. Outside, the landscape revealed itself in its icy majesty. The snow, once the stage for the wolves' fury, was now an untouched mantle, a white veil that covered the marks of battle, as if nature wanted to erase the terror. Yeva allowed herself to contemplate the frost-covered trees, crystal sculptures under the rising light. The air was pure icy, but filled with a quietness that calmed the soul. She stood up with difficulty, aching muscles crying out for rest. Anya's safety and her own was paramount. The water bucket was almost empty, food provisions scarce. Survival in the Arctic, even without wolves, was relentless, but Yeva did not feel the despair of before. There was a new strength in her chest, a resilience forged in adversity. Carefully, she checked the door barricade, the reinforced points. Everything was firm, intact. The wolves had left, driven away by the fear of the drum and the fire, understanding that the cabin, defended by a 10-year-old girl, was impregnable. Yeva smiled, a small, tired smile, but one that carried the weight of a victory. Anya woke up, yawning. Yeva picked her up, cuddling her. "Good morning, my little warrior," she whispered, her voice choked. The journey was just beginning. They would need food, more warmth, perhaps other humans. But for now, the priority was the present, the celebration of life. Yeva prepared the last piece of dried meat, warming it over the embers. She divided it into small portions for Anya, who accepted it with a toothless smile. The simplicity of that moment, the warmth of the fire, the food, each other's presence, was all that mattered. The words of her grandfather came to mind. "True strength is not in defeating the enemy, but in rising when all seems lost. The YAKUT spirit is like ice, it may crack, but it never breaks." Yeva felt the truth in every fiber of her being. She had risen. The girl looked at Anya, who played with a piece of fur, eyes shining with innocence. Yeva was no longer just an orphan. She was a protector, guardian, a legend in the making. The story of the night a girl faced 300 wolves to save her sister, using ancestral wisdom and unwavering love, would be told for generations. She knew that Yakutia, with its beauty and cruelty, would continue to test them. But with Anya in her arms, Yeva felt that there was no insurmountable challenge. They were the last of their lineage, but they carried the strength of a people. The sun, now higher, bathed the cabin in golden light. Yeva, with a heart full of gratitude and hope, made a silent promise to the vast sky. They would not only survive but flourish, a living testament to the indomitable YAKUT spirit. Life, in the frozen vastness, had found a new melody, a song of love and resilience, sung by two sisters under the eternal embrace of the Arctic. The golden rays of the sun, now stronger, penetrated through the small cracks of the cabin, painting the interior with a soft and welcoming glow. Yeva watched Anya, who slept deeply in her arms, her chest rising and falling in a calm and safe rhythm. The older girl felt the fire's warmth diminish, the embers turning to ashes, and knew that the fight for survival did not end with the departure of the wolves. It was just the beginning of a new day, with its own silent but equally relentless challenges. Weariness still weighed in her bones, but Yeva's mind was clear, focused. She had proven to herself that she was capable, that the strength of her people ran in her veins. With a soft sigh, she placed Anya in the cradle, covering her with the warmest furs. The baby stirred slightly but did not wake. Yeva needed fresh water and more firewood. The bucket was empty, and the wood supply, which had been used to keep the fire burning during the night, was dangerously low. With slow and painful steps, Yeva headed to the door. The barricade, though intact, seemed like a monument to her resistance. She carefully dismantled it, feeling the icy air invade the cabin, an immediate reminder of the outside temperature. The improvised thermometer, a branch with marks her father had made, indicated that the cold was still extreme, but not the 71 degrees of the previous night. The landscape outside was breathtaking in its wild beauty. Miles of untouched snow stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with skeletal trees covered in ice. The sun, now a brilliant sphere in the pale sky, cast a dazzling glow over everything, transforming the world into a sea of diamonds. Yeva felt a strange peace, a deep connection with that land that was her home, despite its harshness. She picked up her father's small axe, which was leaning against the wall, and the empty fur bag. The task of collecting firewood and melting ice for water was daily, but today it seemed even more important. A ritual of renewal. Before leaving, she looked at Anya, who still slept, serene. "I'll be right back, my little one," she whispered, a promise that echoed in her heart. The door closed behind her with a soft creak, and Yeva found herself immersed in the white vastness. The icy air stung her exposed skin, but she barely felt it. Her mind was focused on the nearest trees, where she could find dry, fallen branches. As she walked, each step sinking into the soft snow, Yeva thought of her grandmother's words about nature's generosity, even in its harshness. "The earth always provides, Yeva, if you know how to ask with respect and gratitude." She remembered how her grandfather taught to choose firewood, not by cutting living trees, but by collecting what the forest offered, dry branches that the wind knocked down. It was a lesson in sustainability and respect, values that now guided each of her actions. She found a good spot, where several thick branches had fallen. With the axe, she began to break them into smaller pieces, the dry sound echoing in the morning silence. The work was arduous, but every splinter of wood was a promise of warmth for Anya. At the same time, she looked for clean ice blocks to melt. Water was more than a necessity, it was life. Yeva chose the purest ones, those that had not touched the ground snow, to avoid impurities. She placed them in the bag, feeling the cold weight against her body. The sun continued to rise, and the light intensified, revealing the wolves' footprints, now frozen and sharp in the snow. They led away from the cabin towards the distant steppes. A shiver ran through Yeva, but it was not of fear, but of a strange sense of respect for the strength of nature and her own ability to face it. She had survived. Anya had survived, and together they would continue. The task of collecting firewood and ice was an act of faith, an affirmation that life would persist, even in the heart of the YAKUT winter. Yeva returned to the cabin, her body exhausted, but her spirit unshakable. The future was uncertain, but with each piece of firewood and each block of ice, she built hope. Life in Yakutia, with its beauty and cruelty, was an endless journey, but Yeva knew that with love and wisdom, they would find the way. With each new dawn, the promise of a new day was renewed, and with it the indomitable strength of a girl who refused to yield.